Hey everybody, welcome along and thanks very much for joining me. So this is my first LinkedIn Live of 2024. My plan is to do a few more over the next few weeks and focusing both on what you might want to know as a candidate, if you're looking for a new job, thinking about something new. It's a popular time of year as we head into 2024 to reflect on where you're at work-wise and perhaps consider new things. And that's definitely the focus of today. And then future sessions I do will be talking around what you might want to do if you're hiring for roles. So founder or leader and looking to hire. But the focus of today is very much hoping that there's some value for those of you that are looking for work at the moment, whether you're actively looking or whether you're very much focused on thinking through something, that I can give you some advice and some practical advice. So my aim for today is to run through a 9-point checklist on what you can do if you're hunting for work in 2024. And it may be that you don't do all of those things. It may be that you're already doing many of them, but hopefully going through it and giving you some insight from what I've seen over the years will help you to think through what you're doing at the moment, what you could do differently, and what you may want to improve to maximize your chances of getting the role. So I'm going to go through some content that I've got, but I'd also love interactions, feedback, comments, and questions from you along the way. So if you're here, then drop a comment in or like and engage so that I know that there's people listening, but also feel free to drop in questions and hopefully I can see those coming through as comments on LinkedIn or YouTube and be able to respond to those. So I guess if you think about when you found jobs before, or if you haven't found a job yet, then those around you that have found new roles, there's a good chance they will talk about different actions they've taken, and they've probably had then some sort of interaction or some sort of engagement with somebody about a job, and it's led to a result. Your actions, your interactions, and your result. And I think if you ask them how they found their job, most people, or a lot of people, definitely would talk about there being an element of luck in that. They say, I got really lucky because this happened. And I was reading about luck earlier in the week and the 4 different types of luck. But I think the reality is no matter how much luck played a part, there's a decent chance that what played a bigger part was they did a number of things. So they maximize their chances of getting lucky by doing not just one thing and assuming that was going to be the only thing that worked and the only thing that mattered, but doing a variety of things. And then with hindsight, they look back and they say, oh, I did this one thing and I got really lucky, but the luck was really caused by some motion and creating an awareness that meant that through doing 10 things, then there was one thing that got lucky. So I hope that just emphasizes that there are a few different things you can do, but there's not a silver bullet or a magic wand that is going to guarantee that you pick up something new. But what I'll run through today is 9 different things or 9 different categories and headlines that you can think about to maximize your chances of getting something new. And at the end of the session, I'll share that checklist. So feel free to take notes along the way, or if you're watching this recorded, you can obviously stop and pause to what I'm saying, but I'll also make sure there's a slide at the end I'll share, which talks about the checklist that you can go through. So in terms of, I guess, giving you a sense as to where you might want to start. So some people I talk to, and just to give a bit of background, I've worked in recruitment for over 20 years now. Work in the UK. At the moment, ISL Talent, my business, is focused on startups and scale-ups. So tech-driven businesses, 10 to 100 employees that partner with us to hire mostly within technology and commercial. Over the years, I've recruited for public sector organizations like the NHS and local authorities, big corporates like Tesco, 5-10 person businesses as well. And I've spoken to probably thousands of candidates over the years. I've made hires for hundreds of candidates across 100+ companies. So what I'm going to share with you definitely has that history in there, but hopefully is relevant for today as well from what I see directly in my business and with my team going out there to recruit. So that's hopefully why there's some value in the insight I can give you today. But often if I'm talking to a candidate on a one-to-one basis, so maybe a chief operations officer is getting in touch with me because we've met previously and they're getting to think through the next steps and what that might be, then some people are really clear on what they want to be doing next. For others, they're really not sure about that as well at all. So that first step, and number one in my list that I'll share towards the end, is to figure out what it is you want in your next role. Now, of course, you can't guarantee you're going to get exactly what you want, but you do definitely want to do some thinking on that. If you're looking for a role urgently, maybe you have to flex a little bit more than if you're holding out for the right thing and you're in a role at the moment. But figuring out what you want, what is it you're good at? What is it you enjoy? What is it that really excites you? That's the key first step. And some people find that easier than others. A model that I've used to help people think through that, which you may be familiar with, I shall share the image here. So this is ikigai, which comes from a Japanese word, I believe, the meaning for life. And I think in Western way, we've made it in something that it's not entirely representative of, but it's still very useful as a tool to think through what it is you want to be doing with that next phase of your career. So you've got 4 circles here, and the principle being that if you can get them all to align, then that's ikigai and that's your meaning for life. But when I talk about what you're good at, that's one of the circles here. What you enjoy or what you love, that's the top circle. And of course, there's a practical reality. So there needs to be someone out there that needs what you're offering, what the world needs. And then, of course, if you're looking for work, there's going to be a commercial reality to that. So what you can be paid for. And if you Google this model, you'll find there's some questions you can work through. But hopefully the headlines give a sense of what I'm talking about here, which is to reflect on these 4 circles and to think about what it is that you really love, you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. Perhaps to seek feedback from others in going through that process, and get to a point where you have made it clear to yourself and therefore made it easier to make clear to others exactly what it is you're looking for in that next phase. So the first step is to figure out what you want, and I think this is a really useful tool you'll find. Now, in terms of that next step, so number 2 is love it or hate it, we're all going to likely to need some kind of CV or resume to help us get a new job. So number 2 is to create a CV, but specifically to make sure that has some really tangible achievements. So I struggle to put a number on how many CVs I've looked at, but there's no doubt it's several thousand over the 20 years of recruitment. And of course, some of them you look at more than others. I don't think there's a perfect CV template out there. And I think you could talk to me, talk to other people, and we would give you different views on what stands out. But I think one of the things you'll find most commonly, the things that don't work are CVs that are bland and boring and generic. And typically those look like a version of a job description, where it's got your roles, it's got your responsibilities, but it's very static and it doesn't talk about anything that you did as an individual. There is nothing there that is unique to you. So if you're a business development manager or a marketing executive, if you look at your CV, does it talk about you as an individual, or does it look like a version of your job description that's been transitioned or translated into a CV? So what you want to be doing is creating a CV with tangible achievements and something that is specific to you. So in the 18 months you were in that role, what did you achieve? And is that clear from your CV or from your LinkedIn profile? Those two can often be analogous. What did you make a difference on when you were there? So that might be something really tangible. You increased sales by 50%. You grew the pipeline from 1 million to 5 million. You increased hits on a website by 100,000 a year. There's some things that would be able to be more tangible than others, but there should be something that talks about the impact you made. And as a result of that company hiring you into that role, whether you were there for 3 months, 3 years, or 13 years, what were the key achievements? So make sure your CV talks about those and that you're sharing that as much as possible in a concise and a succinct way. I don't think you need to worry massively about whether your CV is 2 pages, 1 page, 3 pages. If it's much more than that, it's probably getting too long, but I wouldn't be too prescriptive. But I'd make sure it's concise and succinct, and then it's nicely formatted and it's easy for the person to read. it should link through to what you are proud of. So what you've done in the past is not always an indication of what you'd be doing in the future, but as much as possible, if you can link back in that thinking through what you want and your CV, you'll be much better placed to be able to make a connection between the two. So the second step is to create a CV, but one with tangible achievements and talking about the impact you made. Number 3 is, I guess, to think about the buyer. So in this case, someone who's going to be hiring for you. A lot of founders I talk to, they talk about building product and making sure there's product market fit. And sometimes they forget about the distribution, which is what I'll come on to in the sort of points 4 to 9. So this is the last part of really making sure you've got that product, i.e. in this case you, and that it fits in with, I guess, a product market fit. And to know the language of the buyer is really important as part of that. So the person you want to be working for in your next role, if that's a chief marketing officer or a head of sales or a head of software engineering, what are their pain points? What is it they are looking to achieve in their role that would cause them to want to hire somebody like yourself? They'll probably want to go from point A to point B. So what are those points? And you may not write about those in your CV, but your CV should match through to those points. So if I'm a CEO who has recently raised a seed funding round of £2 to £3 million, part of that is going to be probably moving from founder-led sales to building up a sales team. And if you are the person that would want to be hired by that founder, you probably understand the pain points I'm likely to go through as a founder. So moving from developing relationships with my network through to a scalable sales process, making hires for the first time and developing a sales playbook, because that's not something I've done before. So if you understand that those are likely challenges and pain points for that hiring manager, in this case, the founder, and that that's a role you want to perform, you need to make sure you understand those, that they are covered in your CV, covering letter, LinkedIn profile. But as you start to move into your go-to-market plan, which I'll go on to in a minute, that you've thought through what those pain points would be. So knowing the language of your buyer and using that to, I guess, bring it to the sales analogy, to know that your value proposition is clear is really important. So we talked about figuring out what you want, creating a CV with tangible achievements, and knowing the language of your buyer. And those are really the things in terms of building that product, i.e. making sure that you know what it is that you are looking to present to the market. You know, what's the value in you, to put a term on it. So if there's any questions on that, any comments, then drop a note through into the chat here and I can pick back up on that. And I'm going to start to talk about how you would actually go about looking for work once you know that you've got your kind of your offering as it can be. So point number 4 here is that, of course, the reality is you're going to need to be applying for jobs, but specifically you want to be applying for jobs with a follow-up. I saw an article in Forbes recently that said that maybe 15% of positions are filled via job boards. So you need to know that it's not 100%. It is a reasonable proportion, but clearly there's a lot of jobs that don't get filled via jobs. Having said that, a lot of your activity and the easy things to do that definitely is necessary is going to be applying for jobs. And I'll talk in a bit about how you can hopefully find the 80% of jobs that aren't advertised. But in terms of advertised roles, then you need to be applying for jobs. But you need to recognize that there are a lot of people out there that are applying for jobs. Things like the Easy Apply on LinkedIn and different AI bots make it really easy for people to apply to jobs. And a drawback of that is that if you're a hiring manager, you may well have 100, 200, 300, 400 applicants for roles. So we've had some sales and marketing roles recently for some of our startup clients, and we advertise with their name, their branding, but we collate all of the advert response and filter that through and put that alongside the people that we proactively reached out to. And it's not uncommon for a head of sales to get 300 or 400 ad responses. So if you're one of those 300 or 400, you're going to have an amazing CV to stand out. And the reality is that that alone will not maximize your chances. What you also need to do is to have some sort of follow-up. So for me, that would be if I'm applying to a startup, connecting with the founder on LinkedIn, sending them a message, mentioning something personalized. What is it that caught my attention about their product, or what is it that excites me about the role? If it's a bigger business, maybe it's their internal talent team, their head of talent acquisition. Obviously, if I've got connections in there, which I'll talk about in a minute, then making sure that you've sent a message to them in some way. Of course, LinkedIn is an easy place to find people, but perhaps not always the best place to message people. It can get quite noisy with outsourced service providers. Hey, recruiters, I get them as well. People sending messages all the time. So maybe there's a more specific follow-up over email or through Slack if you're in shared groups that you can make. But some sort of follow-up is essential to the jobs that you want to be looking at. You also want to be thinking about where are you finding those jobs. So, of course, LinkedIn, Indeed, they're going to be very generic sources of jobs, and you'll find good jobs there. But if you're looking to work in startups in particular, then job boards like Work in Startups or Venture Leap or Otter are going to be much more focused on your niche. If you're in sales or DevOps, there'll be certain job boards out there that are specialized within that sector. So have a search on Google, find particular roles, but also then sign up to the different job boards and get some alerts set so that you can find these things coming to you and apply to them quickly when they do come in. Because if companies are inundated with responses, there's a good chance they're going to prioritize the ones that come to them first. So making sure you're applying for jobs, but making sure you've got that follow-up there as well. Number 5 is away from applying for jobs, that focus on how do you unlock the 70, 80, 85% of jobs that perhaps don't get filled via adverts. And number 5 is very much about building a network or leveraging your existing network. And specifically as part of that, having a system to engage your network. So the people I've spoken to that have used their network really well to get jobs are very systematic around how they do that. So whether it's one contact a day or 10 people a week, or they're going all out and trying to get in touch with 20 different people in their network every couple of days, then they have a system they follow and it's methodical. And as part of that, you want to have different approaches to different people. So something else I'll share is there's a guy called Robin Dunbar, who Dunbar's number is 150, but his broader research is around the different circles of friends you've got, which is illustrated here. So the smallest circle is the most intimate. So we have an average 1.5 people we are very intimate with, through to 5,000 people we might know. And I'd struggle to say that I know 5,000 faces, but the principle being the wider the circle gets, the looser your connection. And if you were thinking about this circle and how it's relevant to developing your network for looking for roles, I would think about the sort of circles from 150 inwards. And maybe the circles of 500, 1,500, 5,000, the ones you reach through social media, which I'll talk about in a couple of points' time. But in terms of your proactive networking, depending on the stage of career you're at and how much time you've had to build up that network, the network of people that would take a coffee with you or that would have a conversation with you is probably between 50 and 150 people in my experience. Now, the conversation with that people in the 150 group probably is going to be quite different than the people in the 5 or the 15 group. But you want to make sure you've got a plan and a system for engaging with all of those circles from sort of 1.5, 5 through to 150. And so some of those will be family, some of those will be former colleagues, people you went to college or university with. If you've got children, maybe it might be people that you'd sit with on the touchline on a Sunday morning watching your son or daughter play football. It might be parents at your school. So anybody can come into that network. They obviously want to have some relevance to the role and the area and the ecosystem you're looking to work in. But go through that and set a goal, whatever's realistic based on your priorities and your time, to speak to a certain amount of people each day and to work through that system and make sure you're having a conversation with them. And as part of that conversation, I think it's really important that you don't message 50 people and say, I'm looking for a job, do you have one? Even if they are people that may be able to hire you. What I think is really important, and I've put it as a particular point in itself, number 6, is to ask for advice and a conversation rather than to ask for jobs. So if I was reaching out to somebody that maybe I met at a networking event a few months ago, I don't know particularly well, so maybe they're in that sort of 150 circle, I'd say to them, hey, Jane, I'm thinking about new options and I'm looking for work as a head of product. I can see that's, a role you've done previously. I wondered if I could have a chat and see what advice you've got. And the benefit in asking for advice rather than asking Jane if she's got any jobs is that hopefully I get both. I think there's a phrase which is, if you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money. My point here is that if you want a job, ask for advice, rather than necessarily asking for a job per se, where it's much more of a binary yes or no, versus in this example here, Jane hopefully is able to say, yes, I think I can give you a couple of minutes, give you half an hour to give you something valuable, which is my advice, my insight, my shared experience, even if I don't have a job per se. So have a system to engage your network, work through it methodically, and also make sure that you're asking for advice, not necessarily just for jobs. So any questions or comments, feedback, then let me know. But to move on to number 7, and that is about being visible. And I've put being visible on LinkedIn, partly because I'm broadcasting on this in LinkedIn, so I know that's where you'll be present. But also I think it does depend on the role you're doing, but it's clearly where, for most of us that are within my world anyway, in the startup world, it's where you're going to find the potential for connections and where you're going to perhaps make that serendipitous connection that ends up leading to a job. And you look back and you say you got lucky, and it's because not just you applied for jobs, but because you're being active on LinkedIn. So what I mean by being visible or being active on LinkedIn, well, the first step is making sure your profile is up to date. So the basics, it's got your roles in there. Maybe it's got a little bit of detail, not as much as your CV perhaps on what you've done in the roles, that you've got a profile picture, maybe even a banner page as well, that you've got something in the about section. So the basics, there is a functioning and filled in profile there that people will get some information from. But what's also perhaps useful to share is that things like keywords and skills and job titles, if you can get those right or avoid getting them wrong, it will massively increase your chances of being found by people that are out there searching for candidates. As I've talked about, a lot of candidates won't get jobs through adverts. They'll become found by somebody. So if you were to talk to one of my recruitment team who's just taken on a new role, then one of the things that will be part of their playbook for finding people is to go onto LinkedIn. They'll go into LinkedIn Recruiter and they will search on skills in LinkedIn. So if I was looking for a Java developer, I would put in Java as a skill and maybe some other frameworks. And the first candidates that will come back to me are the ones that have filled in their profile and put Java as a skill on there. And the ones that will come top of that list will be the ones that have linked it into each particular role. So I'm not going to show you how to do that today. Potentially you can do that another time. But the first thing is, when you look at things like skills and think through job titles, you might not recognize the importance of them, but it will really, doing that well, maximize your chances of getting found by either a recruitment consultant working for a company like ISL Talent, or an internal team, or even a founder or an individual who's going out there searching on their own behalf. They might quickly jump into a search, and LinkedIn's algorithm will prioritize the people that have got skills in there. Similarly on job titles. So if you've got your job title as, if you're a sales manager or a business development manager, but your job title says sales MGR rather than manager, then some search functionality will be sophisticated enough to pick up on that, but some won't. So make it easy to be found. You may have loved calling yourself Chief Vision Officer in your last role, but if really you were the Chief Executive Officer, then that's a much more mainstream title. It's going to resonate with people when they land on your profile. But even before that, in their searching, there's much more chance they find you if you have something that is mainstream and simple. And maybe when you talk to people, you give that sense of personality. But in a LinkedIn profile, make sure you've covered the basics, and things like skills, keywords, and job titles are really important as part of that. So once you've done your profile, the next step I would say is to think about some engagement. So at a simple level, that's going to be commenting, liking, sharing different posts. I'll talk about in a minute your own posts, but as a minimum, then interacting with people on LinkedIn. The way the algorithm works is that the more you interact, the more people's feeds you show up in. And if you're out there looking for work at the moment, the more chance you have of being seen and being found. So it's no matter whether you've got 50 connections or 15,000, it's a really useful tool to be able to amplify your reach and reach into other people's networks, as well as get the message out there in your own. So build your profile, make sure you're doing some form of engagement, whether that's 30 minutes a week or whether it's 1 hour a day is your judgment to make, but something regular in terms of engagement. And you can take this across different social networks as well, but LinkedIn being the one that's probably most relevant for a lot of you. And then the next step is posts. So posting on LinkedIn is not something that everybody feels comfortable with, and it's not advice I would say is guaranteed to make a difference and maybe isn't the best thing for you. But for a lot of people, simply doing a post a week, maybe a couple a month even, can be a really good way to show to their network they're active. In a way, it doesn't need to be a post saying you're looking for work, although there's a value in doing that for some of you, but it keeps you front of mind. And so you put a post on there, 3 or 4 days later, it goes up in someone's feed, and they realize that actually this is someone that I worked with 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe they're good for this position that one of my advisors has mentioned to me, and it's where those getting lucky, those serendipitous moments come. And you'd struggle perhaps to track it back to that LinkedIn post, but it's one of those things that can put you front of mind. And that's where a lot of hires are made, because someone just happened to be reminded of you or to see you active. And they then connect the dots through to a role or position or a company that they know of that would really value someone like yourself. So the posts could be, I mean, you can do a whole, webinar, and there's people out there that do lots of work around what your post could be. But for me, if I was looking for work, maybe I'd post around lessons learned in my previous roles and some of the things that I think really important. Maybe it's something topical, maybe it's something personal, maybe it's a topic for discussion. It could be all of those things. It could be as simple as reposting articles that you've seen, although I don't think that's a great way to get engagement, but maybe it's adding your 2 cents onto an article you've seen. Maybe you feel brave enough to write your own articles, and there's a big spectrum in between those, but being visible on LinkedIn is key and is point number 7. So there's 2 more points that I'm going to make. So number 8, I guess, is an extension of what I've talked about in number 7. So number 8 is around being active in your community, which of course LinkedIn can be a part, but it's not going to be the only part of that. So being active in your community could be going out and about to events. So I'm based in Bristol. There's lots of tech startup events that go on in Bristol. So maybe if I was looking for work, I'd make more of a point of going out to those. It could also be joining WhatsApp groups that are, if I'm looking to work in climate tech, maybe it's hunting out different WhatsApp groups like London Climate Connection, Climate U, where people in my ecosystem are active. Maybe it's Slack channels, could be following people on Twitter, engaging in LinkedIn groups. So there's a load of different ways you can be active in your community, both physical and virtual, but it's a way to partly learn about what's going on, to potentially make connections with people that know about jobs, to make connections with people that are hiring themselves or can help you with some advice. It might be it's just becoming aware of the different companies that are growing, but being active in your community is a really good way to, again, get a bit lucky and bump in somebody who is unlikely to offer you a job there and then. But a couple of months down the line, you'd say, actually, because I went to that event, I bumped into so-and-so, she mentioned this, I spoke to him, and this led to that. Long story short, job offer through being active and getting out and about. And then the final point is, over and above being aware of the jobs that are out there, then you probably could do with spending some time finding out the companies that are growing that aren't advertising the roles, or that maybe aren't hiring now, but could be good places for you to work over the next few weeks and months. And to me, that's around finding growth companies. Of course, there'll be companies hiring that aren't in growth mode, but the more you can find the companies that are growing, whether it's 10 to 20 employees or 100 to 200 employees, the better chance you'll have of knowing a bit about those companies before they post a role, or ideally having conversations with them before they even get to that point, and giving yourself a head start over and above people that are applying to the adverts, or meaning they don't even put an advert out, because you're their ideal candidate and there's already been some sort of relationship formed. So there's a general networking point that comes into the previous point around being active in your community. But also, if I wanted to find growth companies, I would look at awards. I would look at the various lists of, in my world, fastest growing tech companies or hot startups, various different lists that hopefully you can think through what those would be in your sector. Look at where investment's going. So if there's investors that are in the future of work, and that's an area I want to work, then signing up to their mailing lists, finding out who is pitching at events in that field to find those companies that are likely to be in growth mode. If you've got LinkedIn, then there's different searches you can use to look at companies that have grown their headcount, particularly if you've got something like Sales Navigator. But even just the basic search, you can look at companies that are increasing headcount and look at details of funding. And it might even be that it's companies that have got cool products that you think are going to go somewhere. So I remember chatting to someone who had been a really early senior finance hire for Skype. And I talked to him about how he got the role. And it's because he'd seen details of Skype, video messaging tool. He'd emailed the founders and said, this is a really cool product. I've got a finance background working within tech startups. Let me know if you ever need any help. They had a couple of calls and he ended up doing some fractional work for them as a finance director. So it can be a number of ways you could find those companies in growth stage, but being able to find companies that have got momentum and that are perhaps building a product, raising money, is a good way to find those growth companies. So that is the end of my content in terms of helping you to find a job. So what I'm going to do to hopefully make it easy is to share with you the various steps that I've run through, because I appreciate there's a fair bit of information that I've gone through here. So the different steps here. The first one is to figure out what you want. So we talked about Ikigai and making sure you understand what you're good at and what you enjoy. The second step is to have a CV, but one that is unique to you and that really talks about your different achievements. To think about the buyer's language and whether that's reflected in your CV or comes into the outreach that you do to try and find jobs. But why would somebody find value in hiring you? Making sure that when you are applying, and you definitely need to be applying for jobs, that there's some sort of follow-up, but that also you don't rely on that. So that you have a system for networking that you go through in a methodical way. That you're focused not simply on asking for jobs. Do you have a job? Yes or no? But you're asking for advice and asking people to share their experience so that you can learn from that and maximize your chances of getting the right thing. You want to be visible on LinkedIn, whether that's simply your profile, covering the basics, whether it's engaging, whether it's posting yourself, and making sure that you're becoming front of mind to people. That you're active in the community, whether that's physical, virtual, or a combination of the two, and that you are putting some effort into finding growth companies. So hopefully if you're looking for work, you're already doing some of those things. If you're not doing some of those things, hopefully it gives you an idea as to some of the things you can be doing to maximize your chances. And for those of you that have gone through a lot of these things, maybe it's simply a reminder as to what you need to be doing to covering the bases. What I would say is that unfortunately, I suppose in running my own business for the last few years, I've not had to look for a job, but I talk to a lot of people who are out there looking for different jobs. And as part of that, I would say that there is definitely a law of diminishing returns, both in terms of the effort and the reward you're getting, but also psychologically making sure that you can have a system and put some effort and energy into it, but take some time. I know that there's a commercial reality to needing a job, but take some time not to focus fully on the job search. So that's where a lot of this networking and conversations can help you do something different than sitting there endlessly scrolling through a job board and feeling that you're banging your head against the brick wall, because I've spoken to many people about the frustrations of that. So if there's any further questions on what I've covered there, then please let me know. I can see a couple of questions have come through, so I'm going to try and answer those. But if you've got other ones, then I'll be around for another 5 minutes or so. So happy to go over those. Before I do, then if you've enjoyed the content today, then please drop a comment in or send me a message and let me know what you found useful and any ways you would have found it, I could have improved it. If you know other people who are looking for work, then please send them to this session. I think it will be recorded on my LinkedIn profile, and I'll do future ones. So please let people know about that in the future. And on the other side of things, if you're talking to people that are scratching their head around making hires, so you're talking to a founder of a startup who's C to Series B and looking to grow, or a leader of a business that is needing some help around tech or commercial hires, even if they're not hiring at the moment, always happy to be a bit of a sounding board and get some advice. My business is ISL Talent, and we recruit for startups and scale-ups, tech-driven businesses throughout the UK. So I'm always interested in people that are active in that space. So the first question here is value drawn from a covering letter. I think you'll find different opinions. My personal opinion is that something that helps you stand out is really useful. Now, that might be a covering letter. It could be a tailored CV. It could be a follow-up note on LinkedIn. So broadening out covering letter to something that is personalized or personal and helps you to stand out, I think is really useful. No doubt things like ChatGPT make the act of writing covering letters a lot easier. You could take your CV and take a job description and ask ChatGPT to write you a covering letter, and it'll do a pretty decent job within 30 seconds or so. So I think you need to recognize that there'll be a lot of people that are using AI tools or putting in their own effort to doing them. So I would only do it if you think it's actually going to, if I'm the person you're writing it to, show me that there's something personal you've got in there, rather than a templated, hi, first name, at company, I really enjoy your company, and for very generic reasons. So if it can be genuinely individual and it's a balance between applying for a lot of roles and making an impact on the roles you do, I think it can be useful. So if I'm looking at a job application, is there a way to, let me see if I can share this here, is there a way to tell which are the most valuable parts to make sure you accentuate examples in your CV when tailoring? So as I understand it, that's saying, what are the parts in my CV I would prioritize? Again, something like, excuse me, ChatGPT could be a good tool to upload your CV to, upload the job description, and then say, where are the parts where I seem to match this? And where are the parts that I maybe am falling short? And then you can highlight areas in your CV, obviously, making sure that it's authentic and accurate rather than putting in stuff there that isn't reality. But you can then highlight things in your CV by doing that. Maybe at more simple manual level, looking at the job description, making your own interpretation, and then picking out exactly what it is that comes out of the job. Having said that, then your CV is not there to get you a job, it's to get you an interview. So I wouldn't worry too much about putting loads of detail into matching a CV and a job description. And there's a hell of a lot, if I was talking to a founder or a hiring manager, then that they would say that they really want in a hire. Or if I ask them about their most valuable hires, that isn't in a job description, or he's probably at the bottom of a job description. So I think I've rarely made a successful hire from 2 sheets of A4 of job description and 2 sheets of A4 a CV. A lot of the time it's been talking to the hiring manager about what they're really looking for, which isn't always reflected in the job description, and then talking to a candidate about the value they can really give, which again isn't often reflected in the CV. So, but using tools, just sitting with the 2 documents side by side, using some AI tools can be a good way to hopefully highlight where you're short and where you are ahead of the curve, and then put that into your CV or a covering note or a LinkedIn follow-up. So hopefully that answers that question there. The next question, when networking, is there a particular event type that will help you get more noticed than others? The answer is almost certainly yes. what that event type is would very much depend on what it is you do as a job. So if I am an account executive who's worked in SaaS businesses and is very strong on enterprise sales, then clearly going to a SaaS focused event is much more likely to get me noticed than if I went to a general tech event, or if I even broadened that out more and went to a local business networking event. So there is a balance between being niche and also increasing your surface area of luck and getting noticed. But I think as much as possible, I think about the ones where you have a connection on some level. So that might be that you're in Brighton and it's a Brighton event. It might be that you're really focused on looking for startups and it's a startup event. It might be that you're in the SaaS sector, it's a SaaS event. It could be climate you want to work in, it's a climate event. So there's a few different ways around industry, size of business, scale and stage that will link into that. And I wouldn't advise you to go too niche or too broad. It's probably a balance of the two. And of course, going to an event takes time, and you can walk to an event and meet 5 people that are all totally irrelevant to what you want, and then go to the next one and get lucky on the way in when you're putting a coat into the cloakroom and you find someone who's hiring for a role that fits your sweet spot exactly. So going back to that very first point around doing a load of things and iterating and improving and figuring out what works well is probably better than being too prescriptive from the outset, but also thinking about what are the events that are likely to give you most value based on one of those kind of key criteria. So hopefully that's, I can't see your name, but hopefully that helps in terms of some guidance on the event side of things. So we can see there's a couple more questions coming through, so I'll go on to that, but I've got time for perhaps one more after this. So if there's anything else you wanted to ask or any other feedback, then drop a comment in there. So Samuel, thanks for the feedback. Tech industry feeling the bruises from last year. Where do you reckon the tech creative design sector will sway in Q1 and Q2 of this year, and in the Southwest Bristol area in particular? And have you had much interest already? And who knows? You can look on LinkedIn and look in publications and see loads of forecasts from the last few days. It's the right time of year to make predictions for 2024, but who knows? How accurate those will be. I think that the sectors I can speak most accurately around are UK focused, Southwest and London, because that's where we have most of our clients, and within tech very broadly. And I would say that there has been a fair amount of bruising for the last 18 months in those sectors. I haven't seen it significantly improve in the last 6-9 months, but I also haven't seen it step backwards at all. So I think we're probably at hopefully what will be a low point, but definitely a more static point. We're a business of 10 employees. We work with probably 40 businesses. So I don't have a big picture, and a lot of data to go on, but we're working with a lot of companies that have raised £1 to £5 million of funding. And we've had as many new client wins in the last 3 months as we'd had in the previous 6 months. And there's a lot of companies that, if I compare this time last year to the last few weeks, sort of before Christmas and even the first couple of days now, there's a lot of companies that are asking us, even if they're not hiring, for some insight and some data on the hires they are planning to make. And I think that is a contrast to this time last year, where it wasn't front of mind for a lot of people. So in that sense, I would say, hopefully what I'm saying is a positive, in that people are thinking about hiring, and we're definitely doing a fair bit of hiring activity. Whereas last year, it was all about extending runway, much more focus on layoffs and letting people go and not making hires. So hiring does seem to have gone up the list of priorities, but there's a really strong correlation there to people that have had recent funding or are quite far along that fundraising process at the moment. I think for those companies that haven't had funding in the last 12 months and aren't about to land a sizable funding round, then hiring is still not on the agenda. So, and I think we'll probably find in the course of this year, it won't be binary, but we'll find the sort of the haves and the have-nots when it comes to hiring, and there'll be companies that are definitely growing and are in certain sectors like AI, health tech, climate, versus those that are maybe in areas such as consumer e-commerce that probably aren't creating as much momentum, etc. So hopefully that kind of helps a bit. So it feels we're probably coming to the end of what's useful now. If there's further feedback or comments or questions, then please drop me a message or put a message into the video here, and I can see that and then come back to you. Otherwise, like I mentioned, if there's other people you think it's useful to make an introduction to, whether it's candidates looking for work or people that could do with some advice on hiring for their startup or scale up, always happy to have a chat with people. And I will repeat this again in the future, which is why I really value your feedback and do other variations as well. But in the meantime, I'll simply leave you with the 9-point checklist, which hopefully gives you a nice, easy way to think through what you're doing on a work front, and look forward to chatting in the future. Thanks very much.